Hi, everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Diploma. I'm Catherine Chapini. I'm the editor and producer of the podcast, and I'm here with the hosts Avery Park and Emerson Sprinkle.
Yes, hi. We have a very, very exciting podcast episode today. This is one of my favorites. We have Margaret Hartigan here with us today. She has such an interesting story. If anyone knows the Phillips Exeter Academy, she went there for high school. Then she continued to go to Brown University, where she got her bachelor's degree in English. If anyone plays squash, she is a squash player. I play squash and no one knows what that is, so please look it up. She plays squash and she is cool, so squash is therefore cool by the transitive property. She worked as a financial advisor for a bit of time at Merrill Lynch before she broke off and started her own startup company. It's called Marstone Incorporated. She is the CEO and founder of this FinTech startup. Like I said, her name is Margaret, and that Mar is in Marstone is for Margaret. She is
I didn't
just,
know that. That's cute.
oh, no, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. She is super cool, super inspiring, and she is who I want to be when I grow up. So,
Same.
please watch this.
I mean, yeah, she was like obviously she's incredibly successful, but she was just so down to earth. I love talking to her. Obviously people don't see what happens before we start filming, but she was so incredibly kind to Avery and I and just like asking us about ourselves and things like that. And I just
Yeah, I was like, who are we interviewing right now?
but she was just so incredible. Like really like a truly inspiring person to have on.
Like Emerson was saying, what really stood out for me on that call was yes, like she said, she's super successful, but she was just so warm and
Hmm.
so kind. And I mentioned in the podcast, but you can tell like the working environment that she must create must be so just so nice. Especially like I said, she is the CEO and she is the founder and of a fintech company, no less, in a what we would consider a male-dominated field. She was just so inspiring, especially for females. I'm sure like Emerson and I were just sitting on the call, just feeling like, oh my gosh, I love everything that you're saying. And she started
Hmm.
talking about managing a coffee shop in Rhode
Yeah.
Island. And I was like,
No, yeah, I feel like going off of that, like being a woman in such high power, like I feel like that's like so nice to hear about, and especially for our podcast, like that's really what we want to like talk about and let our viewers hear about. And just editing it, she seemed like super sweet. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say even if you don't want to go into the fintech space or you don't want to be an entrepreneur, having your own startup company, I would still watch this podcast solely because of her words of encouragement. I feel like most of the time she was talking about things that you don't need to be in this field to hear and to take in
Mhm.
and absorb and apply to whatever you will do in your future.
I also feel like one thing that really struck me was the fact that obviously she was an English major. Um,
Mm.
and she ended up, working at this like fintech company, or not even working, sorry, like founding.
Mhm.
And so
This
I
is
think
who I
that's
want to
really
be when I
great
grow
because
up.
obviously, as we're entering college, it's scary to think that you have to kind of choose a major and that's going to set the course for the rest of your life. But I mean, she was an English major, and humanities aren't really closely associated with like technology or finance in that way. And I think it was really cool to see that she used that to get to where she is today.
Right, like she was a financial advisor for the majority of her professional time. Marstone is, I think, at least 10 years old, but still young
Hmm.
startup company. But yeah, even before that, she worked corporate. I think she said she would have stayed if she didn't think of creating Marstone. But yeah, I think for me personally, Emerson and I both are saying that we want to go similar path in college, but it's nice to know that even after that, you're not confined to what you did in
Hmm.
college. Anything helps. Yeah, that in particular was really cool
It
to
was
hear.
really great. Yeah. I
And
just,
again, it like goes for any subject. Maybe you
mhm.
want to do like study, I don't know, French, but then you want to become, I don't know. Wait, give me a
Great
job.
example. But yeah, I agree. I agree with
I was trying
everything
to go the
Avery
other
just
way.
said.
Why can't I think of any science class? This is so bad. Like,
Um,
geology, you might study chemistry and then you might become a lawyer, for
Yeah,
example. Yeah,
exactly.
there
So,
we go.
you know, obviously, this is just the beginning of our lives. But I think it's really cool to see someone who has just made so many like great strides in their career. And so yeah, this was definitely one of my favorites.
Yes. All right, so here she is, Margaret Hartigan. Yeah, let's get into it. Welcome back to Beyond the Diploma. I'm Avery Park, and I'm here with my co-host Emerson Sprinkle. We are blessed to have our wonderful guest today, Margaret Hartigan. And so now I want to hand it over to you. And could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what your current role at Marstone involves?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Avery and Emerson, for having me. I've been looking forward to this for some time now. I'm Margaret Hartigan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Marstone. And Marstone is a digital investment, goal-based planning, and financial wellness platform that seeks to demystify and humanize finance for all people.
That's like so interesting. I'm really excited to kind of get into that. But starting with your background, I know that you were an English major at Brown. So can you kind of just tell us a little bit about your early career and kind of the stuff that led you to becoming an entrepreneur, especially in what I think Avery and I would love to talk about, which is like such a male-dominated field. So obviously how you got to where you are now.
Sure. Well, we only have so much time, so I'll try to make it short. But you're right. I was an English major at Brown. I love the humanities. I often say that everything's math. So sometimes, if you think about poetry or writing a good essay or whatnot, it's somewhat formulaic, right? It's almost like a proof. And some people naturally gravitate towards numbers, and other people gravitate more qualitatively towards an arc of a story and whatnot. And so that's where I landed. Um, you'll find that you're on the beginning parts of your, adult career, but you'll find that things don't move linearly, that things might seem random, and then you look back at a certain point of time and you actually see how they all add up. And I think that's an important lesson, to not beat yourself up when what you thought you wanted doesn't actually appear or things kind of go sideways. So I became a financial advisor after working at a .com or internet company back in the early 2000s out in San Francisco. I really enjoyed that experience, and that was an incredible learning lesson about how businesses work, how companies get funded, different life cycles of things. And then, as you might know, there was a big crash, and so I did a consulting gig for a little bit, actually in energy. And then I became a financial advisor. My is a financial advisor, and I thought, I like investing, but I like the whole idea of what are companies, how do they work, how do they influence people's lives, how to make people make decisions, and then how can you invest in them, and could you sort of match your day-to-day consumption activities of buying toothpaste or hair products and understand what that meant for portfolio creation and whatnot. And so being an English major, likes enjoying storytelling. I enjoyed taking what were seemingly complex ideas and being able to translate them uh, in a way that was accessible and not intimidating, hopefully, to individuals. So that's how I began. Um, I never intended to be a CEO, and I never intended to be the head of a fintech company. But what happened was after the great financial crisis of 2008, I had been client facing, as you know, from 2001, let's say in San Francisco, just in time for the financial crisis. I drove cross country with a friend back to New York, and then got there just in time for the financial crisis. And so I was inspired to create Marstone, having worked with people during the best and worst of times in the financial markets. And I realized that as an industry, we face three major problems. The first one was that most people don't have a lot of comfort or ease with terminology around investments. A lot of people naturally are intimidated about math, even though they make decisions every day. And I thought, could there be a way that we could harness design and technology to help people better understand the opportunities and also avoid what they wanted to miss. Um, and so that was sort of the origin story for me. I felt that there was such a huge crisis of opportunity and understanding for people. And I thought that a lot of people either can't qualify to work with a financial advisor or they felt unworthy or some other thing. And I thought, let's go meet the people where they are. So very naively and ignorantly, I left a successful practice at Merrill Lynch and I decided to create a platform that other financial institutions could use to help serve their demographics.
That sounds so interesting, especially I guess to me and Emerson because we are more humanities girlies. We're favorite class, English class, both of us. Um, and so now I guess I would like to talk about you talked about your past experience, how you worked in more of what you would consider like a traditional career path, like more corporate. Before you started with your startup. And I guess what I would like to ask is, do you think it's important for students who want to become entrepreneurs or to start their own business? Do you think it's important for them to first start in a more traditional or corporate environment before going off and starting their own company? Or do you think it's okay for people to just jump right in? I guess any experience that you'd like to speak on based on that.
Well, like everything, there's not one right answer, right? There's different ways to get to the same destination or what have you. So I know it's a pretty challenging time for people coming out of school right now. I think even for internships, right, over the summers, and also for people who are recently graduating to land jobs. And that happens. There are just different cycles. And I was having a conversation with a friend earlier today, and I said, maybe this is a really great opportunity for people, maybe to have that last summer of lifeguarding or waiting tables or babysitting or doing a side hustle on Poshmark or, whatever people are up to today. Because I actually think one of the most influential experiences I ever had that really served me well for being a boss, being an entrepreneur, being a woman or a minority in the workforce or in life was I actually managed an espresso shop in a little seaside town in Rhode Island during, I think, end of high school, college, or maybe it was just in college. And this is before espresso and coffee drinks became so huge, and we didn't have Starbucks even on the East Coast at that point. So I ran this little espresso shop, and it was the first time I had to learn to advocate for myself, whether it was about wages or about hours. And then I, had to work with other people and I had to manage difficult clientele and busy seasons and things not working. And, there's a term that people refer to called soft power skills, and that's your ability to, communicate very effectively with people, to be patient, empathetic, ask Socratic questions versus jump to assumptions. And I think that for a lot of folks that got stuck at home during the pandemic and didn't get to interact with people as much and maybe didn't get that early exposure to jobs or some of the extracurriculars, I think anyone who does anything in the services industry, it really is an incredible, incredible asset to all things in life, but in particular, the job environment, because it's much better to actually get that muscle memory and some of that scar tissue started when it's a waitressing job or a bar back or parking cars because you're a valet or whatever it is. Those skills, that muscle will serve you so well when you go for your first early jobs. You'll kind of worked out those butterflies in your stomach and that lump in your throat. So what I would say is that all opportunities are great. To answer your question, you always want to look at what's the risk and what's the reward when you do certain things. And I think if you're going to jump into an entrepreneurial thing right off the bat, just make sure you're not digging yourself in a major hole, that there's a way to do it where you give yourself a time period or you can get certain assistance. I think working at a big corporation or working for government and then going to the private sector, there's so many different ways to do it. There's really not just one path.
That's so great. I like that, like Rhode Island coffee shop, like sounds like such a dream. I feel like Avery and I were like, oh my gosh, that's so lovely. But one thing that like really stuck with me, you kind of said this earlier on, was like how those like skills you learned how to like advocate for yourself and things like that. And I think that's just something, especially kind of looking at where you are now and the fact that you were able to use those skills to get where you are now. So I guess my question for you is just like, what advice would you have, I guess, for women, no matter where they enter in their career, whether they're, kind of like climbing the corporate ladder or they're like, starting a startup right away. I guess what advice would you have for women kind of coming into an industry like this?
In financial technology, you mean, or
Yes.
corporate? There are a lot of really great mentorship programs out there. And then there are a lot of people like myself who really enjoy giving back right now. And so I think that that's great. I think they're, as what you all are doing, they're providing a lot of opportunities on YouTube and a lot of coaching and things of that nature. Um, and I think asking for advice, asking for people's time. And, what's interesting is it doesn't always have to be in the industry where you actually are pursuing. I think a lot of the lessons in coaching and rules of the road are universal. So a school teacher or a lawyer or someone in like the oil gas industry, we're all challenged with different unconscious biases that we either have about other people or other people have about us. And I think sometimes if we can remember that too, then sometimes we may not take it as personally because it's hard not to take it personally. I mean, at my age, at my level of success, it's amazing how many times I'll say something in a meeting and it'll be parroted by someone else a little bit later and it's a fresh idea and there's no attribution. In the past, that would kind of annoy me. But now you realize it's human nature. And truthfully, in that case, a lot of people have to hear something multiple times before it lands. So it may not be an anti-me thing. It may be it took a while for that to germinate.
That was actually a perfect transition to what I was going to ask next. On the other side of things, you hold such a large leadership role. What do you look for, I guess, when you are hiring like new talent? What stands out to you about someone who would be a good fit at Marstone or just in the fintech industry in general?
Well, this lesson I actually learned from there used to be this coffee shop bakery that I went to a lot when I was living in New York. And I was working at Merrill Lynch and they had a blog or, a newsletter that they posted about different people at the bakery and they did interviews. And I remember one of the founders in the interview said they asked this question and she said, I can teach anyone almost anything. I can't teach them to be empathetic, kind, and have a good work ethic. And I think, you're in the Northeast, you're in the US, obviously very bright, whatnot. We can get very siloed and myopic in what we think success is and what we think matters. Um, and as an employer, I will say it's not really about where you go to college. It's not really about a lot of those things. It's about, are you coachable? Are you a good teammate? And are you committed? Those are the things. And are you a kind person? Those really matter because inevitably there will be very, very difficult times in a business, whether they're internal strifes or maybe it's with a client or very difficult things. And it's how you handle yourself under pressure and with others that really, really matters because one not great team member actually really impacts the entire team.
Yeah, so actually that's like, yeah, perfect along the same lines of what I was about to ask you. Obviously, kind of as you go throughout your career, you develop all these different skills, and like you said, like being kind, being empathetic, like those are just personality traits that you should have. Are there any like specific skills that you kind of look back on and wish that you had like developed earlier, or that you think that it's really important for people to develop, like alongside it from, or the like, what you said, like being kind, empathetic, things like that. But just like any specific things that you kind of would like students to know.
I think it's important when you're in school, as you all are, to explore as much as you can and do what they would call like a core curriculum where you're really well balanced. Like you're doing language, you're doing math, you're doing sciences, you're doing those things. And while you're in school, you can actually still continue to experiment with those things, maybe take it not pass fail or something like that where it doesn't impact your GPA or whatnot. But the reason I say that, I wish I had stayed with some other subjects longer. and made myself more vulnerable in an intellectual setting longer. Um, but having said that, at a certain point, and you'll get to this fork in the road shortly in the next few years, you also decide what you want to double down on and what you're really good at. And I think somewhere you want to balance not trying to become something that you're not and that you don't actually love and doesn't spark joy, and also figuring out how to cultivate and harness what you are really good at and what you enjoy. I think staying curious and playful is super important, especially now, in an AI world and a data world and a constant consumption world. It's important to take breaks and continue to be playful, whatever that means for you, whether it's art, sport, museums, curiosity walks, whatever. That's a really important practice that I think that one wants to maintain all the time. And if you are going to go down the path of being an entrepreneur or something like that, I think having side hustles and other fun things, whether they're passion projects or whatever they are, is super important because believe it or not, adding that other interest actually fuels what your day job is. If you only stay focused on one thing, it's like being an athlete or whatnot and constantly using that one muscle and never ever diversifying and making your whole body healthy. That's true. That's true in your mental mind and in your professional life as well.
Yes, I just wanted to start by saying I love the way that you respond in your answers. You just sound so like thoughtful, and I feel like that really like speaks to how I feel like, in my opinion, based on what I heard, you must foster such a great like work environment. But I did an internship at a startup recently, like last summer, and I just remember how like the pressure of it all, like it's so hard being like a startup. And so I just want to know, like, with that great work environment, how do you balance the pressure of being, I know Marstone isn't as young as some other companies, but it is still pretty young and not as established as a corporate company. How do you balance that pressure of being, a startup business?
Thank you for your kind words. There are days where people probably think I'm not all those things, and I, being self-reflective, will be like, I'm not all those things. So that's important because I'm human and I get overtired and frustrated and whatnot. You, I think that all you do is you try, keep trying, and I actually think one of the biggest mistakes I've made, there are a lot, or learning lessons. Let's not call them mistakes. And I think this is true of women in general, that to be cautious of is not carving out enough time for myself, because then you can get resentful or you can create bad habits or things that, whatnot. And I have tried to create a culture and an environment where people do put their families first, or that they know that there's always space for their personal lives and those are priorities. Because in the environment you were probably in and that you may have observed over time, people miss weddings, they miss graduations, they miss different things. And I can tell you, you almost never remember why you missed those events, but you always know that you miss them. And there are times that you have to miss them. And I had a really good reason why I missed something very important a couple of years ago. But I think fostering that time for self-care and fun and relationships is super important. You have to schedule that into your life just like you would a doctor's appointment or a meeting with your boss. It's super important. Now you have to be responsible about that and mindful that you're not impacting your other team or being kind of indulgent or something like. But um I don't believe it has to just be hard for the sake of being hard. And I sometimes think there are cultures that have that, that are competitive about being in the office the most and blah, blah, blah. I remember in the early days telling our team, hey, it's Friday on the East Coast during the summer. There's not a lot on the calendar. I don't know that everyone needs to be here right now because there will be a time where I'm going to ask for your Saturday or I'm going to ask for something else. So I think if you create that trust and like kind of dialogue, I think it's important. But you never want someone to be fearful of saying I'm pregnant or my mom or dad needs help. That's not going to be good for any culture.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like perfectly along the lines of what I was gonna ask you about how you kind of balance your professional life with your personal life, because I think especially for women, there's a fear that you either have to be one or the other. You have to be like very successful and, you know, um like career oriented, or you have to be like kind of like a family oriented person, and that there's not really a way to balance that. And so I guess I was just wondering like how you have found kind of like a happy medium, and like obviously being really successful, but also, you know, embracing your personal life. Because I think that's like a very kind of scary thing for women like entering any sort of professional field, is like, how do I make sure I can kind of have both of those things?
I'm not the best person to ask. I don't know that I have have done that. But some days I think I've done it okay, and other days I don't. I definitely let Marstone take priority. I felt like an incredible responsibility to my team and to our investors. I mean, big time. And my nature is probably to put people first. So I now try to practice more balance. You guys, where you are in your career and just starting off in college, if you can practice the mindfulness and intentionality of your day and putting yourself first, not in a selfish way, but like you're no good to anyone else if you're not in a good spot. And if you're not thriving and having that like magnetic energy or feeling kind of in control of your own energy and space, you're not going to be there. There's not going to be that much there for others. So, when I'm at my best self, I do morning meditation, I do morning pages, I do yoga, I play sports, I visit friends and family, but we can all get out of kilter. You both have done it with school, I'm sure, or tournaments or what have you. And that only gets amplified over time when the more complexity in your life. A friend of mine once said, a woman can have it all, but not at the same time. So there's probably truth to that. Men can probably have the family and the startup and at the same time. I know a lot of extraordinary women who've done it and done it well too. But just figure out over periods of time, what do you want to do and when are going to be some logical times to consider that. We're not really in control, so be open to it. But I think if you have a mindfulness and intention of what you personally want and how you want to live and how you want to feel, then I think the path will start unfolding. But there's a book called The Artist's Way. Many people reference it. And there's a daily practice of morning pages where you write stream of consciousness writing for 3 pages longhand. That's an extraordinary practice every day because you don't sometimes don't even understand what is actually creating anxiety. And she recommends that you do it pretty much right when you wake up because it takes about 30 to 40 minutes for the ego to wake up. And so you'll get things on the page. You're not even supposed to go back and read them, but you can throw them out later. But it's pretty interesting to see what keeps popping up. So that could be a great way of casting out to the universe what you want to do.
Great. That's just so interesting to me. I'm just like loving everything that you're saying right now. But just to shift back, like looking through a different lens of, young professionals entering this field, obviously the financial technology space is growing so much alongside with AI. I just have to ask, what are, in your opinion, some of the most exciting opportunities coming up? What should people be looking out for? But also on the other side of AI, the ethics behind that, especially in relation to fintech. And again, there's so many new things. What do you think is next? I heard, is quantum the next AI? There's just so many new things coming up. And if you would like to speak on any of those.
Sure. I think AI is awesome. I think for humanities majors or anyone who maybe is an engineer and didn't know they want to do something, whether it's their own app or whatnot, AI is like a huge gift because it translates, ideas. You can get literally instruction on how to create an API or to actually write code for you or whatnot. I think AI also will help you tackle things that you want to tackle. For instance, maybe I want to learn a language or I want to revisit math. It, it'll be able to curate a lesson module for me based on how I learn, based on where my stumbling blocks are. So I think AI is an extraordinary complement and a huge equalizer and opportunity provider. I think the danger with AI is not embracing it because and that's when I was saying stay playful and curious. I think this is a huge area where I encourage everyone, regardless of age, to be playful with AI. Maybe it's cooking, maybe it's like I want to take my family on vacation. Maybe it's I want to start a garden, whatever it might be. Be playful with it because it's going to give you confidence really quickly. Um, anyway, so I think it's super, super exciting. I think it's going to really help people improve their lives. Yes, it's going to change jobs, but I don't think it's going to overall reduce the number of jobs. It's just going to create new jobs. So I'm a huge, huge fan of AI, and I think it's a great complement. If I were starting the company now, I would do it so differently than I did it before because of AI.
Yeah, I feel like that again, what you said, it's very exciting. Like it's like there's a lot to look forward to. And I think obviously you are, but also Avery and I are really interested in kind of seeing how that will evolve over time. Um, but I guess now in the completely opposite direction, if you look back on your life, and like specifically like being a high schooler, like you're about to graduate, you're a high school senior, I guess what would you tell yourself? And looking back on your life, if you could do it all over again, would you do it the exact same way, or would you change anything, or things like that?
Well, I would say I'm not going to say like I have regrets, but if the wisdom, the benefit of being older and looking back is you can see little things that you would have done that would have been beneficial. So, wearing my corporate hat, I would say, look, if you're working summer jobs and you have opportunities, just open up a Roth or an IRA or a savings account and just start investing in the S&P 500, a little bit over time because time is on your side and the benefit of compounding interest. And it's like all things. I was thinking about it this morning. My greatest success has come with daily consistency of things, not one big event, right? It's just all the daily minutia that you don't think is important, but if the consistency is showing up, intentionality, and maybe a little better than I was yesterday, or just the fact that I showed up today might be the huge win because that never changes. So that's one thing. The other thing is there's a really great book. I think it's called The Great Leap, and it's written by Gay Hendricks. I think his name is. I might be wrong. Um, but it's all about what are your self-limiting beliefs? What have you told yourself that you're not? And has that impacted you? And I think if I look back, I probably prevented myself from different things. You know what I mean? I probably had self-limiting beliefs. Some of those self-limiting beliefs may have been put upon me by society, by my work environment, by perceptions of what my gender is. Maybe they were family. It's always a good question. What could I have done better, or would I have done different things differently? I do think it's important to be reflective, but also to be compassionate in the way that you look at things. I'm sure already with your school year or your lives to date, you have opportunities to reflect too. I think sometimes we're a little bit too hard on ourselves and think somehow we should have done something differently or better. Certainly, there are cases where that is true. But I think it's a really important thing to remember that it's in our stumbles and our mistakes and our losses that's where some of the best lessons are. So, of course, I could have done things differently, perhaps would have driven to different outcomes. But I did a lot of things right. And the areas that I'd want to invest in further that I think helped me in the past, but will certainly serve me and those around me in the future, are to continue to be curious, to remember that curiosity and fear can't coexist on the same plane. So if I'm fearful, can I offset some of that fear with being curious and unpack it that way? Sometimes my fear might be a factor or the result of what I might find are self-limiting beliefs. And I think that this is important as you all look to your next chapters of life, whether it's college, a gap year, perhaps pursuing a career, are there any areas that you're not pursuing, whether it's your personal life, your professional life, relationships, and look at why is that true? Why am I not pursuing these things? Do I truly not want them? Do I actually want them but believe that I'm not capable of it? because when I look back, I do believe that some of the avenues perhaps I didn't pursue were really not paths that weren't available to me necessarily, but perhaps I had my own self-limiting beliefs that I was incapable or worthy or up for the challenge or something that was ready for me. So I think that that's an important lesson, to cultivate that practice of being reflective and understanding, what is the source of my belief systems, and sometimes pressure testing them to see if they're accurate. So I don't know if that's helpful, but as I, continue to mature both as a leader but also in my own life, I think some of these areas of personal inquiry with compassion and curiosity are a great tool set to cultivate.
That was very helpful. Thank you so much. This whole call has been so enlightening. I don't want to speak for Emerson, but I mean, you're just like who we want to be when we
Oh no, well, thank you, but trust me, behind the music, it's not. This is so awesome. LinkedIn's the adult, equivalent of Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. Behind the music is a very probably different story, but thank you.
Well, just thank you so much for coming on. Sorry I missed the tail end of it. My power went out. I have no idea why. But we have it all, so I'm really excited to hear your final answer on that. But yeah, just thank you so much. This has been really insightful, and it's just been great speaking with someone who, again, just being a woman and being so successful in a certain field. I think that means a lot to Avery and I, so we really appreciate it.
No, I'm honored. Thank you for having me, and I hope you stay in touch. And if I can ever be helpful with anything, please let me know. And I look forward to seeing the YouTube and the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, congratulations and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much.
you.
All right, see you later.
See ya.
Bye.